Hey everyone, back to talk a little bit here. Just to keep it a brief episode, I wanted to discuss a recent float that I did on Saturday night and explain an experience that I had that I hadn't really come across before and expand it out maybe just a little bit into talking about Buddhism or mindfulness, general like Vipassana, I guess, but keep it fairly light tonight. So yeah, I was at the float, and generally the way that these tend to go for me at least is for maybe the first. So I'll do like a 90-minute float. The first, I would say, 15 to 30 minutes usually is almost a consistent stream of various thoughts coming in and out of my head without even really being able to catch them from one to the next. There being no other inputs, no light or not really any sound except for sometimes you hear kind of the pumps working in the background or the sound of your own like heart beating, but you just don't have the normal sensory distractions that you would otherwise sometimes when you're meditating. So the quiet that you might expect to find, with your thoughts originally there, can take a little longer than usual because I think that the kind of the heightened contrast between nothingness and kind of an absolute void versus like having thoughts arising fairly rapidly is pretty high contrast. So, anyways, I would say maybe around like 45 to an hour in, and it definitely also does get kind of tricky to tell what sort of time range you're in there. Like I usually have a decent sense, and like a quarter of the way there or halfway there or whatever, but beyond that don't really know where things are at. But yeah, probably somewhere around halfway I started having this feeling, and it's definitely going to be a little bit challenging to put the right words to this, but I wanted to try it just because it was something that I've done maybe 20 or 25 floats, and I really haven't gotten this state. So I was laying, and there was really no sensation between my skin and the water to such an extent that it really didn't feel like I had a body anymore. And this is, I guess, the experience that you sort of, I guess, yearn for if you're thinking about going to a float tank. The sensory deprivation kind of idea was very tantalizing for me when I first started thinking about this float tank experience, and it was kind of originally said, okay, the temperature is going to be the exact same temperature as your skin, so you won't be able to tell where your skin ends and the water begins, but it's never quite perfect, and you've got the layer of your chest which can be sticking up out of the water, or with your breathing taking in that oxygen, you're going to feel some sorts of movements, but for whatever the case was this time, I was just in a state where none of those little tells were there, and for what I mean, it really, like, you just fall into this vacuum of like timelessness almost when I try to describe this kind of like how long did it feel like you were in this, because in some ways it felt like a very long, not a year, but like a month or a week or something worth of just like experience happening. But then Also, it almost felt like a snap second of like, whoa, that was, kind of far out, and now I'm back here. But it was, I think specifically just the feeling that I ultimately came away with it from was that there was a sense of not having a particular want in that moment, and for however fleeting it may have been in if you were to be measuring it with a clock, it was in some ways an extended period, it felt like, of just being free from any sort of real chains to needing to get on to the next problem or solving the next want. And it was really a transformational thing that happened. And it's not to say that over the last 2 days since then that like my life has been altered in any way, but or I guess I shouldn't say anyway, in a significant way where I'm interacting with the world on a fundamentally new plane or anything. But it's something that I definitely wanted to get down in the video because it was it was a step over a hurdle that I just didn't necessarily know was kind of waiting there in the abyss for me to walk over. And it was something that was really interesting to come up against. And one of the things that, as I started kind of trying to go back to a little bit before that moment, was to think about and I mean, I kind of just laughing to myself because I started the sentence with "I think," and the idea of what I was going to say is that I was attempting to focus more on my like lower extremities and to get out of the sensations of my head. So you obviously have a lot going on with your nose, your ears, your eyes, your mouth. Even in the float tank, you've still got the breath coming in, you've got the water right about ear level, like when you're laying there. So, and even with your eyes, you can be opening and closing them. So there's still kind of like this sensory hub right up near your head. And so thinking about almost putting consciousness down in the feet and focusing, just taking that focus and awareness away from the head, I think was partially what was able to help kind of just step over that hurdle that I was talking about. Because I would say a lot of times the breath is it always is really nice to be in the float tank and be able to come out of it feeling like you take these really, really deep breaths in, and it's going for like 8 or 10 seconds on an inhale, and everything is feeling smooth, and you come out of there with like your lungs just open wide. But it also, as the air is kind of passing over, it's a sensation. And so just taking the sensations, focusing down to the feet, there was a lot less there, and I think that was relevant. And so as I've been reflecting a little bit since then, the idea of what I said, I think that sending this awareness to my feet was important. And so I think that if I were to continue doing this even in day to day, maybe this would be helpful in kind of breaking out of some of the incessant thought that you have while you're at work or while you're driving or while you're even eating. A lot of times you'll be eating and the whole meal you're just incessantly thinking, and this idea has been said of like eating your thoughts. And so, there's this part of me now that's saying, try to push awareness to your feet throughout the day. Just try to reiterate that idea. And it seems almost like the idea of the Zen koan, though, where it's this sort of like body mind clash, because I can't use my mind to push my awareness towards my body and engage my mind to just kind of keep doing that. But I was hoping that maybe, as if it was a little mental note, even if it started off being more requiring more conscious thought, that maybe over time it could become a little bit more subconscious, and then just dropping that, like that center of gravity from always being right around your head to just shift it a little bit to being, this idea of like the embodied consciousness that will come up in meditation. If you feel there's so much more, even just volume. If you think about like your body, like your head is such a small aspect of it, and you're missing out on all of these other sensations if you're not thinking about what's or if you're not focusing on what's going on in your like little left toe. You're never going to feel that during the day. But if you slow down and just go into that level of awareness, it's going to take you out of some normal patterns. So I think that's the main idea of what I wanted to cover for this. And there's probably more to be explored in this avenue of I guess the one thing that I don't really I talked a good amount about the bodily sensations and moving awareness around between various parts of the body, and how the body is interacting inside of this flotation chamber. But it's not something that you always have around. But what was interesting, I think, was the experience of sort of this wantlessness for however long, however fleeting it happened to be. And that I'm not really sure what to do with all of that yet. It seems like at any given point, I'm always I was kind of talking about this in one of the early episodes. I'm always planning for what's upcoming, trying to have plans and contingency plans in place, so that I won't run into problems. And so there's always a worry that I'm sort of out to solve. And I think that for a lot of people, you've got some worry about the future that's upcoming, and so that's just going to fill up your kind of bandwidth. And if that's the case, then you never break out of this cycle. It's always just bouncing from one to the next want, and you don't even notice. And so if you just have this time to break out of that cycle, even for a little bit, it definitely makes you think about what to do with all those other times. And it's something that I've played with every once in a while on like maybe a weekend morning, where the sort of the first state that I wake up in, it's my brain saying, these are like 4 or 5 plans that you could try to do today. Which ones are most important? Which things should you try to get to first? And which things would be fun? And just already within like seconds or minutes of me waking up, just laying there still in bed, my mind is going 100 miles per hour, and it doesn't need to be. It could just be enjoying the sunlight coming through the shades. So I think that like that aspect, the sort of wanting and the cycle of wanting and always having that primary want, if there's some way to bring that idea into awareness a little bit more without having it be too much of a want in its own, that's an area that I'd like to pursue a little bit more. But I think for now the main focus here is at least just being able to talk through the sensations of the float, and also the lack of sensation of the float. and I think that's been fairly covered. So I'll wrap that up here, and I'll be making another episode soon. Talk to you guys then.